So a while back, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, I made a video about a trend on the ATP Tour regarding the two-handed backhand. And back then, there was only maybe a handful of players using a specific technique on the backhand that is suboptimal. And I can tell you that now, this is not a trend anymore. This technique has spread like wildfire. What I'm seeing now is juniors and many players on the ATP Tour and even some on the WTA Tour using the following technique on the two-handed backhand. And I'm going to explain to you what that is. So on the preparation stage, players will point their racket towards the side. So this is very reminiscent of how you would point the racket on a forehand. So on a forehand, the racket will go towards the side on many ATP players and some WTA players. Now what you would normally see on the two-handed backhand is a take back that goes further back where the tip of the racket is pointing straight towards the back fence, or on the WTA Tour it actually points a little bit more behind the body. But what you'll find now, especially on the ATP Tour from players like Kyrgios, Berrettini, Khachanov, and the list goes on, is a take back position that goes towards the side. And in today's video, I'm going to explain to you why this is suboptimal, why it doesn't give you the same range of motion as some of the greatest two-handed backhands in the history of the game. And most importantly, I'm going to tell you why you shouldn't adapt this technique at the recreational level. And for what I'm about to explain to make sense, you have to understand the crucial difference between a forehand and a two-handed backhand. These two things are not alike, because if I put my racket on the side of the body on the forehand, I can still have range of motion. In other words, the racket will lag behind, not only to here, but on high-level players, the racket will lag behind all the way to here, where the tip of the racket is pointing towards the corner of the side fence. Now here's the problem. If we take the backhand as an example, and we put the racket here, this racket will not lag in the same way. Why not? Because we have two hands on the racket. There's limitations when it comes to the non-dominant wrist. It will not bend that far. So what happens with players that start their backhands here, they get less range of motion. Some of them will remain on this side of the body, and some will go a little bit further back. And this ultimately results in a stroke that's shorter, that has less acceleration, and the reason for that is a reduction in the range of motion. And now let me explain the techniques of the current best two-handed backhands on tour. I was always a big fan of Alexander Zverev's two-handed backhand. In my opinion, it is top 3 in the world. Of course, everybody knows that Novak Djokovic has the best two-handed backhand of all time, but I'm also going to include Rafael Nadal as a player with a phenomenal two-handed backhand. And what you will see all these 3 players do is put the racket further back in their take-back position. And what naturally happens from this position is that the racket will drop before it starts to go back to a neutral position here. So take a look at the range of motion going from here to here to here versus starting on this side and then going towards the ball like this. Even if the racket drops, there's simply not enough room for the racket to accelerate. So what you will see from players like Kyrgios or Khachanov or Berrettini is that the backhand looks short, stiff, and rushed. Now, I know what you're thinking. Nick, these players are making millions of dollars with their backhands. They have really fast backhands that can hit backhand winners. No doubt about it. They still have extremely good backhands. I'm not saying that these backhands are bad. And in fact, this technique might be adequate in certain situations. Let's say you're playing on a super fast indoor court or on grass, or you're returning a ball that's very deep and flat, or you're returning serve. A reduction in the take back is going to work out just fine. However, when you don't have those things, this is where these type of backhands look more forced. And if you want to take a look on YouTube at a backhand that was mishandled by Berrettini with this technique, this happened on match point against Andy Murray in the 5th set at 5-4. Berrettini had the entire court open, had a two-handed backhand in the middle of the court, and he did one of these backhands. And of course, he didn't get enough range of motion on it, and he dumped it into the net. So what I'm saying is the following. This backhand technique can work even at the elite level. However, if we compare it to the greatest two-handed backhands in the history of the game, or currently the greatest backhands on tour, we see a different technique. It is one where the range of motion is greater, the racket has more room to accelerate. And when we take a look at these backhands, for example, Zverev or Djokovic, it looks more flowing and it doesn't look as hectic and as tough. So you heard me just say that this type of technique can't work at the elite level. But I'm here to tell you that at the recreational level, where two-handed backhands are something that's very difficult to adapt to a lot of recreational players who started playing tennis later in life, is that if you adapt this technique, let's say you want to copy Kyrgios or Berrettini and you start your backhand from here, you are bound to have big issues with your two-hander. Because generally at the elite level, there's a tremendous amount of pace and players can just absorb that pace and send the ball back pretty fast with this type of technique. But you at the recreational level, you're dealing with less pace coming at you, and for that reason, if you shorten your take back and you start right here, it's going to be very difficult for you to get any type of power on your two-hander. So what you must do is point the tip of the racket towards the back fence a la Djokovic. You have to start your backhand like this. Now, on the WTA Tour, you don't see this technique too frequently. Yes, there's a few players that do it, but the vast majority of WTA players who have fantastic two-handed backhands take the racket at least towards the back fence, and some of them will take it even behind the body like this. And it's super important for you to understand the context of the situation that you find yourself in on the court. So yes, you will see even Djokovic take his racket back here from time to time. If he's returning serve or if a ball is coming at his feet, he won't go all the way back. So the context is super important. You're going to have your regular take back that goes to about right here, but there will be some scenarios where you will have to shorten it depending on the pace of the incoming ball and the depth of the incoming ball and so on. But your regular bread and butter take back, it cannot be here. It has to go further back for the reasons explained in this video. And you're probably thinking, Nick, are you saying that the technique is getting worse on the ATP Tour? How can the technique be regressing? Isn't it supposed to evolve and get better and better as time goes on? Well, generally, yes, but in the case of the two-handed backhand, I have to tell you, no, because it doesn't make sense from a biomechanical standpoint. No matter how much you try to get range of motion for here, you just simply won't, because you have two hands on the racket and that non-dominant wrist is blocking the racket from going back. So this is a suboptimal technique. And yes, this is not an improvement in technique. This is a negative trend that's happening on the ATP Tour. And you're not going to argue with me when I tell you that Novak Djokovic, Alexander Zverev, possibly the two best two-handed backhands on tour, do things differently. Yes, Kyrgios, Berrettini, and Khachanov with this technique still have elite two-handed backhands that win them millions of dollars, and they're still incredible backhands. I'm not saying that, but compare the backhand of Kyrgios to the backhand of Djokovic, and there's no argument in my mind that Djokovic's backhand is better.